Before we go into the questions, so I'll share a bit of our story, the AWS User Group Kenya. So basically, we are based in Nairobi, and we serve more than 5,000 members right now. We have held more than 40 meetups so far, and one of our greatest events was AWS Community Day 2024, which was a remarkable event. So I'll invite Mark to share more on the user group.
Thank you. I guess we'll have to optimize on the mics for now.
Well,
yeah, so, absolutely. So thank you very much for just gracing us today. I think it's surreal. Even before I do this, I just do a quick poll in the room, because these are the superstars who are here today. How many are students here? How many are just students generally? Students? Wow. Okay.
Excellent.
Wow. All right. Cool. How many community builders are here? Community builders. Community builders.
You deserve it.
How many community builders? Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Cloud captains. Cloud captains. There we go.
Ooh.
Yeah, others are actually outside as volunteers. And yeah, obviously, last but not least, how many heroes are here? That's amazing. That's amazing. Yes. So I think she's already mentioned about User Group Kenya, and she's done a really amazing job with that. There's also AWS User Group Pwani. Moracha is not here; he's out of the country, but it's led by Jacob Moracha. They have hosted over 200 plus events. I guess for them, they're the coast, so they kind of enjoy a bit of the beach, do a bit more. For us, we're in Nairobi, more traffic, but still a lot more people. Also, I think we can talk about also the AI/ML User Group Kenya, led by Kevin. I think Adele can go on with that.
Okay, for AI/ML, it's being led by Kevin, founded this year, and is one of the AWS User Group, the newest AWS User Group in Kenya, and an active one. So their main agenda is to bring cloud engineers, data science, machine learning engineers, just to learn and leverage on AWS technology. So they have hosted 2 major events, AWS Terraform Cloud Day, as well as Women in AI event.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the user group leader is Kevin. I think Kevin, you can just stand up. He's doing an amazing job as an MC also. Absolutely. I think he also had the privilege of seeing your keynote at last year's reInvent, and he was just telling us about it. I think it was really, really amazing. Beyond that, we'd love to appreciate the AWS team who've kind of made this possible. I think they're in the audience here, Robin, Veliswa. There's Jason Dunn, who's not here in absentia. Thembile Martis also, who's also a community manager. So we really appreciate you guys. You're not here, but hopefully the next time we'll be able to have you here. So we'll kind of dive into the questions.
Well, what I want to add to that actually is that the fact that we're here, you should see this as how important we think Kenya, but in general Sub-Saharan Africa is. We just visited Rwanda last week as well. The fact that we're here actually really hope signals to you as well that we're here to help sort of raise the next level of engineers that need to fuel the digital economy of Kenya. And it's you that is actually the time.
Yeah, amazing. So we'll dive into the questions. I think once we finish the questions, we'll do a few photo sessions, then go on break, essentially. That's good. All right, so I'll go into the first question, essentially, right? I've just done a poll in the room, the community builders, the students who are here. Oh, there's also AWS employees here, I think from the ADC in Kenya. I don't know how, are they here? ADC in Kenya, AWS engineers, there they are, absolutely. We've probably harassed them with a few of our requests, we apologize. But yeah, probably still have others. I'll kind of get to you guys later on. But my question is, the AWS community in Kenya has grown impressively with over 10 plus community builders who are in the room, 3 active user groups. What advice would you give community leaders, right, about fostering sustainable tech communities in emerging markets?
I don't know, advice, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing it really well. But the advice to have to the community is that, I don't know, if you look at the last lesson that I gave you, disconfirm your beliefs. Yeah? I mean, learn from each other. I think the most important part of the community groups is to come together and maybe have a bit of fun and do a bit of hacking and build some things. But it's so important to get your hands dirty. But if you do that in isolation, with nobody there, it's hard to learn. Yeah, and even if there's online learning or things like that. But doing things together makes, first of all, learning so much more fun, but also prepares you for the reality. I saw a lot of students here. I don't know how many students have actually programmed as a group. Yeah? And even if you do it as a group, you probably hated it. Yeah, because there was others were all slacking and never doing what they were doing, things like that. In reality, in the real world, in businesses, everything is determined by collaboration with people in your team. Yeah? So you need to be, working together here prepares you also for being a very good team member, because you know how to do things together. If I think about sort of hiring people directly out of college for Amazon, one of the things that I would have looked for always, have they been part of some open source project? Because in general, in an open source project, you need to work together with other people. You need to do code reviews. I mean, who in college has ever done a code review? Nobody. Yeah? You always get to start things from scratch. No one gives you 10,000 lines of code that says, refactor this. Yeah? By the way, a really good job for Amazon Q as well. Yeah? Refactoring, not too great. So, advice I would have for the community is to stick together, to learn from each other, to also help each other. Because after all, that's why you're part of the community. Yeah? And you will all be able to have a great future together if you help each other.
Okay, on to the next question. Kenya has been...
Hero!
Kenya has been recognized as the mobile-first innovation. How would you see this experience positioning Kenya developers in contributing to the global unique ecosystem?
Connectivity, eh? Well, you guys need to fix that. Yeah? Let me just put it, I mean, there's little I can do to fix this for you, except for putting more satellites in the sky. Yeah, I think in talking to some of the government folks, I know everybody's eager to put more and more fiber into the ground. We also hear that much of this fiber is just shared by different providers. So it's not necessarily if you use two providers that you can sort of load balance over them because it's somewhere they're over the same line. You see lots of fiber cuts happening, things like that. I think crucial for having a good, solid digital economy is that connectivity needs to work just really well. Now, we were in Rwanda, and at some moment I thought like, every night at 10 p.m., the internet would disappear. I thought maybe there's a government action that says, it's 10 o'clock, time to go to bed. Yeah? Stop scrolling what you're doing. Yeah? But if we build systems, if we build our systems in AWS, and we build them 99.99% available, but your connectivity is only saying 1.9, this is an effort that needs to fix. I think at Amazon we want to contribute to that. I mean, but we're not a company that lays fiber into the ground. But we are putting satellites in the sky. And I know quite a few of people in remote areas are already using Starlink, which is great. But I also think that competition is great in that space. So we need to have multiple providers that will provide satellite connectivity in the future, such that, and whether you use that as your primary link, or whether you use it as your backup link, I see that that's really crucially important. Now in Rwanda, I haven't visited enough companies yet here, so can't give too many Kenya examples. But for example, in Rwanda, the government wants to have access to information from all the healthcare centers and even all the individual healthcare workers in the country in real time. So they can look for outbreaks and they can look for bigger patterns and things like that. So everyone has a Starlink as a backup, because it's important that this information flows. If as a government you want to start building more and more digital systems, you need to make sure that all your citizens can get access to those systems. Not just the privileged few that happen to have fiber to their home. Yeah, and as such, I think building out that infrastructure, which you're doing, by the way, yeah, is crucial for the future of a solid digital economy. And I hope that we launched 27 satellites about 2 months ago, I believe. On Monday, is that public? On Monday, we launch another 27. And we'll continue to launch these satellites to make sure that there is satellite connectivity in every area, regardless whether there's fiber or not.
I'll go on to the next question. This is a bit of a touchy subject, but I think either way it's something we need to face. It's an elephant in the room. So brain drain in Kenya especially is significant, across Africa and Kenya especially, with talented developers and often leaving to go abroad for opportunities essentially. Do you have any suggestions on how we could build a stronger local ecosystem, how we can build stronger local ecosystems that create compelling opportunities and essentially the brighter minds to be able to stay and build essentially locally?
Get better connectivity. That fixes it. No. I actually don't agree with you. I don't agree there's a brain drain. It may have been, but I see more and more younger people being eager to stay in country and solve the problems that you have in this country. And not in this country, just in this continent, maybe. Yeah? I see more and more younger people being very motivated to think about what were the problems I saw when I grew up that we sort of need to fix. If you think about, so the United Nations has this prediction that by 2025, we'll have 2 billion more people on this planet. How are we going to feed them? How are we going to make sure they have an economic future? How are we going to make sure they have health care? I think it's up to us as technologists to fix that. Governments are not going to fix this. Yeah? If they could have, they would have already. Yeah? It's up to us as technologists. And what I'm extremely excited about doing this trip in Sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria, Rwanda, Kenya, is the enthusiasm of young people to really start fixing those problems. And I got excited about this a number of years ago already. And I was really traveling the world, looking at sort of how are companies using AWS, what can we learn from them. And I met a lot of young startups that didn't seem to be interested in becoming the next unicorn. Yet, in the US, everyone that starts a company wants to become filthy rich, yeah? Which is not that bad. However, it's often not focusing on products, and it's not focusing on your customers, it is focusing on getting rich, where money is the most important thing. And what I encountered in traveling in South America, in Africa, and in Southeast Asia, is that there were many young businesses that were focused on solving a really, really hard problem. And so we started this documentary series called Now Go Build. You can find it on YouTube and on Amazon and on Prime Video and things like that. Because I thought that these young businesses should be promoted more. The fact that young people are wanting to fix the biggest problems in their countries by using technology is extremely inspiring. So one of the first ones that we did was a young company in Indonesia, Hara, in Jakarta. And so the problem in Indonesia was smallholder farmers that are mostly growing rice have no identity. And if they have no identity, they can't get a loan at the bank to buy seeds for the next crop. They have to go to a loan shark, 40 to 50% interest. Half your crop is gone before you've even planted it. So what Hara did is give these farmers an identity and measure their plot of land and the yield of that plot of land. That data set is extremely valuable for governments, for banks, and so they have a good business. Yeah? And banks want this data because they want to give these smallholder farmers a loan, because these microloans have a 100% repay rate. It's an enormous, this is a win-win situation. Farmers can get loans for the next seed, for the next crop at minimum pricing. Banks get to have a good business. Government and UN organizations get insight into how crops are being grown. And this little organization in the middle sits there. They're not getting paid by the farmers. They're getting paid by the banks and by the governments. Yeah? One thing that I thought in the past when I grew up, that doing good was something that non-profit organizations did. I've learned over time that you can have a really good business and do good at the same time. Why were these guys in Jakarta actually building this system? Because they were children of smallholder farmers themselves. They knew these problems. And this is something that I see coming back everywhere. I see this in healthcare, here in Kenya and in Rwanda, for example, where young people are really focusing on solving some of these unique problems. Now, the example I gave with this AI-based system here in Kenya for pregnant women, yeah, they come out of an environment where they understand that problem and know that it isn't a smartphone with a fancy web page and a fancy app that these women need. They need the lowest common denominator, which is an SMS. Understanding your world is crucial. So, even though you may say there's a drain, I think that that tide has turned. I see more and more local people being interested in staying here. By the way, going to the US at the moment is not necessarily an easy thing to do either. Yeah? So stay here.
Okay, so you have made this prediction of AI assistant becoming more capable, and I think AI is generating more excitement as well as anxiety. How would you see the role of human developers evolving in the next 5 years? And a follow-up question, what is the learning path would you recommend?
What was the last one there? How?
Okay, the question is, how would you see the role of human developers evolving in the next 5 years?
I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I had one. That would have made life so much easier. I think I already made a few points how we're interacting with AI systems. Yeah. I think it is. I may be shown as a skeptic. Yeah. I'm a skeptic about what we see in the media. I'm not skeptic about the technology. But remember, the media is not necessarily the specialists in this area. Yeah? You are becoming the specialist in this area. Kevin is a specialist in this area. Yeah? Make sure you become specialists as well. You really understand what this technology can do and can't do. Do I think it has enormous potential? Absolutely. But I also am a strong believer in something that's called Jefferson's paradox. And maybe it's easier to explain in the early days of cloud computing. Now, cloud computing, because you no longer had to buy your own hardware, you would become much more efficient by running your systems in the cloud because you could scale down. You remember, scaling down is as important as scaling up. Yeah? Scaling up is to serve your customers. Scaling down is to make sure that you don't pay more than what you absolutely need to pay. Yeah? So, I lost my train of thought there. What was it? Oh, we were talking about AI. Oh, yeah. So think, seriously. What? Oh, Jefferson's paradox. Oh, that was it. I was explaining that one. Okay. Jefferson's paradox is a well-known economic paradox that says that if you become more efficient, you're just not going to do that one more efficient thing. You're going to do a lot more of it. Yeah? And so, if I think about the impact of that AI will have, will it make a lot of things more efficient and more easier to do? I know, if you work for a company, like CTO for Africom, our hero at Africom. Yeah. If you work for, Jefferson's paradox says that if you work for a company, there's so many points where you think you can be a bit more efficient. But the things that we do, if we become more efficient, we just start doing more of it. Yeah? And it's just something, and also you don't have to figure out, will it have impact on my job in the future? Yes, it will. Will it take your job away? Absolutely not. Yeah? let me tell you a story. So remember that the crossing the chasm slide that I put up. A good example of that is of the past is spreadsheets. Spreadsheets were developed in the 60s. They became commercial in the 80s. Lotus 123, Excel, things like that. Now there's basically Excel and Google Sheets and a few of those things left. Before these spreadsheets became integrated into businesses, a bank like JP Morgan or whatever would have a whole floor of accountants with calculators. They were basically a human spreadsheet. When spreadsheets were introduced, basically that whole floor disappeared. The accountants didn't get fired. They actually got jobs where they could use their brains instead of just being a calculator. So what I expect is that whatever area we think AI will have an impact on will make things more efficient. First of all, we'll start doing more of it because it's more efficient now. And we'll move people to the part where they're most creative and most useful by using their brain, by using common sense, which is something that these large language models don't have. Now remember, this is not a Slack channel. You're not just listening to my words. Large language models are on words, on language. If you have someone on the phone and you ask them a question, by the inflection of their answer, you know whether they're lying or not. Maybe. Yeah? I've seen, it's a number of years ago, in the US, where they do all these phone calls always, they're polling just before an election or things like that. And people will be saying, yes, of course, I'll be voting for Harris. Well, in reality, they were voting for Trump. Yeah? But believe me, nobody was being honest about voting for Trump in the first place. Yeah? But you could more or less on the inflection of their voice hear, because these are skills we have as humans. We have eyes with ears, we have smell with sound, and we have experience. All of those kind of things together make us an extremely valuable resource. We're not getting going without work. We're going to get much more work. But it's going to be work that requires our brains, that requires our common sense, that requires all of our senses to be able to actually do the jobs we want. And then the boring stuff, AI can do that.
Wow, amazing. So on to the last question, then I think we can go on to the next, please. I think this question has kind of been outdated, but either way I'll still ask, right? So what are the opportunities you see for the Kenyan developer community to get involved with AWS and potentially produce the first AWS heroes?
Well, you're already here, are you? Well, that answer was easy. Let me give you, whenever maybe some of you will go for work for young business or start from scratch or things like that. There are a few other boring things that you need to take into account when you start doing things. Yeah? Whatever you build, your system needs to be secure. So, number one, whenever you start building, security needs to be on top of the line. At AWS, security will be forever our number one investment area, both in terms of capital as well as in intellectual capital. Our most creative, important engineers are working in security. Secondly, probably your system needs to run at some moment. How are you going to operate it? How are you going to keep track of it? How do you know whether it's working well or not working well? And that can be at the systems level or it can be at the business level. So up front, before you're going to build anything, you need to figure out, how am I going to manage this system? Yeah? And then the third one, hopefully that by the presentation today you guys walk away with, things cost money. Money, no matter whether we like it or not, is important. Is important in your architecture. Is important in the way that you build things. So take really good experienced engineers know these things. They know that up front they need to think about a few things that are not necessarily that exciting. Or security, operational excellence, and cost awareness are the things that you need to take into account before you start building anything. Now we give you lots of tools there, but it's still up to you to use them.
We've kind of wrap up the questions. As I asked the last question, I think we're good to go. I'll kind of turn this a bit and ask Adeline, being the first AWS hero, right? How are you feeling? How's the journey been so far as we kind of queue up the other things? Yeah.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I feel overwhelmed. I feel it has been a journey since 2021. I didn't know it will come up to this point. I've never dreamt of being a hero. Thank you so much, community.
Okay.
Amazing. So you can take your seats.
I'll take a seat.